Hello everyone, and welcome to GFG Resources Live Investment Summit today, hosted by Six. We are joined today by Brian Skanderbeg, President and CEO of GFG Resources, Janet Lee-Sherrif, President at Group 11 Technologies, Dennis Stover, Chief Technical Officer at Group 11 Technologies, and Dwayne Nelson, President and CEO at EnviroLeach Technologies. Brian, Janet, and Dennis and Dwayne will walk us through a company presentation, and then we will be accepting questions live. So you can submit your questions at any time on the Q&A panel on the right-hand side of the screen. And as a note, you can download a copy of the presentation under the Handouts tab, which is also on the right-hand side of your screen. And as always, the summit is being recorded and will be available to watch afterwards on Six.com. So without any further ado, I will hand this over to Brian to get us started.
Thanks very much, Dasha, and welcome everybody to our update on the Rattlesnake project, and I think very exciting partnership with G11, which we announced this morning of the closing of the financing. And what we're going to do today is really walk you through why we think this is so revolutionary to the gold space. And the kickoff will be more of an introduction from GFG and background to the asset, and then we'll follow through with the real technical details of what makes this a special technology and the right asset to apply it to. Before I go into the technical details of the asset, just a cautionary note, I will make forward-looking statements. I'm an optimist, an explorationist, and we're all working in the mining and exploration space here, so I think we're inherently quite forward-looking. When you look at GFG and think about our background, we set this company up 4 years ago, and the thesis was put these large land scale packages together. Let's put them together off cycle, and let's find the right path to advance them. So we executed a couple of these. We're a very competent team that's both built mines, ran mines, and I think established explorers as well. So with GFG, we're based in Saskatoon. We have these two consolidated assets, one which we're going to focus on today, which is the Rattlesnake Hills in Wyoming. And the other asset, which I'll just speak towards one slide, is in Timmins, and it's a large land package there. Our thesis is to work in belts that have potential to yield world-class systems. And we see this potential in both these belts. Alkaline gold systems are renowned globally for the scale of the system they generate. And I think what you're going to see today is a unique application to the Rattlesnake Hills asset. And we're going to be aggressive while we're advancing our various strategies within GFG. So this is about the high level. Who is GFG? We trade on the TSX. We have about 130 million shares outstanding, around a 20 to 25 million market cap, and we would have about 4 million in cash at the end of Q1. Good, strong shareholder base backed by renowned resource investors, Gold 2000, SSI, US Global, Delbrook. These are seasoned, long-term institutional investors that have backed the team at GFG for multiple companies which we participated in. And I will flag Alamos Gold. That is also a very good group that we backed us in our last financing. So as we look at it, myself, I'm the President and CEO. I'm a geologist. Rick, Mark, and Rob Mackey are our team with GFG, and a seasoned board of directors. We're transaction-oriented, we're technical, and we've worked in this gold space for the last 30 years. So I think with this team, you get a very seasoned group that has a track record of success. On to on to Timmins, and just touching base here, this is where GFG has allocated most of our capital the last couple of years, and we went here because it's elephant country. There's about 120 million ounces in this map, and GFG controls the area in pink, which is about 700 square kilometers. We went here because of endowment, extensive cover, history of discovery in the 2000s timeframe, and surrounding infrastructure hosted by largely majors. So we think it's a great place to make a new discovery. GFG is excited about the work we're doing in Timmins, but that's not the focus of today. Today, what we want to do is really focus on Rattlesnake Hills. So here's a landscape shot of the Rattlesnake Hills. These peaks are about 7,800 feet elevation. You're in central Wyoming. This is BLM ground. And ultimately, we're bringing a disruptive ISR technology that has potential to revolutionize the gold mining space. This is truly unique, what this company G11 is trying to do, and we think it's the perfect asset to advance this technology on. So in the center of the page, the switchbacks are actually up the side of North Stalk, which is one of the main ore bodies, and you see Goat Mountain in the background. great place to build an in-situ mine. I'll remind you a bit about what's gone on in Rattlesnake over the years. So here we are in central Wyoming. There's about 40 to 45 million US dollars that's been spent on this asset over the last sort of 2 decades, and about 100,000 meters of drilling. This is an excellent asset with a lot of work being done into it. It's in Wyoming, and Wyoming is an extractive-driven economy. It is a great place to build a mine, and we are truly surrounded by mines when you look at our local land position. Geologically, a lot of similarities to things like Cripple Creek and Wharf. These are Eocene age alkaline gold districts, and this is the entire district that GFG and G11 control here. And the last thing is the opportunity. And I think when you look at Rattlesnake and the partnership we've executed with G11, this is the right asset with the right technology, with the right team. And I truly believe that it's the best way to create value out of the Rattlesnake Hills asset. In a little more blow-up view of the land position, in black is the outline claim block. It's about 135 square kilometers. A lot of targets exist regionally, but for G11, the focus is really in this brownfield environment, the area in red in the core. That has the vast majority of the historic drilling. It's ultimately the area that's been relatively well drilled off in terms of discovering and outline gold mineralization. And there's 2 ore bodies that exist here. One of them is Northstock, one of them is the Antelope Basin. And we're going to focus in and look at a bit of the geology of these things. I remind you, regionally, the pink area are the intrusions. These are driving the gold. The green are the greenfield targets. But we're really going to focus on the core of the land position here in terms of how we're applying this ISR technology into the 2 ore bodies here. And a little more closer view now, you get a cross-section through the 2 main ore bodies. This is a large-scale gold system. It's about 1.2, 1.1 kilometers across, 2 main ore bodies within that area. And on the right is the Northstock ore body. On the left is the Antelope Basin ore body. And you see in shaded colors here where the gold occurs. Anything greater than 0.1 is in yellow here. And most heap leaches will run a 0.1 cutoff. So you can see a lot of the material is mineralized at that grade. And that's ultimately why this thing could work from an in-situ technology. Lots of good high-grade hits. There's a lot of drilling that's been done here. The oxidation depth goes down to about 125 to 150 meters depth. So a large chunk of this ore body is actually oxidized. And that's also quite critical to the success of this technology. Thinking about scale and geometries, the Northstock ore body is about 700-800 meters long, 100 to 150 meters wide, and mineralized down to 400 or 500 meters. You can see it in the cross-section there. It's nice rectangular blocks. It seems to work quite well for thinking about an in-situ application. Antelope Basin's a little smaller, 300, 350 meters in strike length. The core of the ore body is about 50, but it's got a nice low-grade halo around it as well, and it goes down to about 200 meters depth, very sharp bottom. So these are the parameters that are really quite relevant from an application potential. It's oxidized. It's near surface, it's disseminated, and it's expandable. These are the reasons that when we really started thinking about a deal with G11, that this deal for this asset made a lot of sense. And when we wind ourselves back to Q1, we sat down with G11 and tried to invent and negotiate a partnership that truly was a win-win for all parties. And it's cliche, but I think what you see here is a deal that reached that goal. So we set up a 4-stage option earning agreement. And ultimately, from GFG's perspective, we were excited. We wanted a piece of the technology, and we wanted to get some cash back, and we wanted to be carried to production. G11, they wanted to earn to a big majority position here by carrying it to production. So we set up this option agreement. Stage 1 is essentially we're doing historic met testing on historical work. This is let's prove if we can get the gold into solution. Stage 2 is, okay, let's take that to the next stage of drilling some holes in the ground and doing a 5-spot well. That's stage 2. Stage 3 is the commercial phase. Let's just say we prove this in stage 2. It's a wild success. We're going to go build this in stage 3. And that's ultimately an expenditure carried by G11, some equity issued at that stage as well. And stage 4 is it all works. They have the opportunity to increase their ownership and make a cash payment to go along with. So we set up a deal structure that worked for all parties. And I think this really reflects well on the parties involved. and our commitment to finding the right path with the right deal for all parties. When you look at the Rattlesnake Hills Project, this is in central Wyoming. And if you know Wyoming, this place is full of cows, it's full of antelope, there's not a lot of people here, strongly Republican. This place is a great place to build a mine. And when you look at the location here, we're in central Wyoming, we're about 100 kilometers from Casper, Wyoming, top rated mining jurisdiction in the US, really outside only Nevada, I would put it in. Key to the success of what we're trying to achieve here is that the regulators in Wyoming understand and have historical experience in ISR permitting. That is very, very key to work in a jurisdiction where they understand what you're trying to do and how to work through the permitting steps to do it. When you look at the deposit itself, it's drilled off. I just showed you a cross section. It's drilled off in 20 to 30 meter centers, in some places even tighter. There's a wide variety of gold grades, anywhere from 0.1 up to 150 grams, and a wide variety of lithology and oxidizing conditions. So that's key to applying and developing a new technology like this into gold. And it occurs in a variety of hydrostatic settings as well. And finally, at the bottom here, it's in a topography that's actually should be able to work with an ISR technology applied based on our understanding of some of the other deposits that have been tested, albeit in other commodities. So these are all the reasons why we feel at GFG that this was the right deal, the right partnership for us. And ultimately, I think when G11 looks at this asset, why it's the right asset in the right location. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Janet, and she's going to walk you through the remainder of the deck with Dennis as well.
Thanks very much, Brian. Appreciate everybody's time today and interest in our combined presentation. I will give you an introduction into the process that we're implementing in our testing at Group 11, an overview of the company. I'm also going to introduce Dr. Stover, who will take over. Dr. Stover is one of the original pioneers and patent holders in the application of in situ recovery technology in the uranium space, and a valuable asset in all of this. Also on the call, Dwayne Nelson from EnviroLeach. And really what we're doing in looking at applying in situ recovery with the EnviroLeach formula is mining without moving a rock. And this is the introduction of two proven technologies independently and combining them together. Group 11 is a private company where we're looking to revolutionize the extraction industry. We are focused on gold first because it is a high value commodity and the proceeds can be used to further subsidize additional testing. So combining the in situ recovery technology with a water-based, environmentally friendly chemistry from EnviroLeach, and the benefit is incredibly environmentally sound and economically viable technologies. So the opportunity that we see here is really being a first to market potential in the space by combining these two and protecting environmental principles, the water usage, low energy consumption, and really looking at the issues with climate change and low carbon emissions. Our board is quite strong in the industry. We have William Lee-Sherrif, who's with Encore Energy, and Encore is bringing their experts in situ recovery technology to this project. Dwayne Nelson from EnviroLeach, who has developed an environmentally friendly water-based chemistry. David Morgan and Jean Ann, both very strong in their respective analysis and application in the finance industry, and myself as the managing partner. But really, it's the team that is making this possible. And it takes an incredibly wide skill set in order to push this forward. And the team is being led by Dr. Stover, who will take over and explain the in situ recovery process. One of the things that it's important to address in the mining industry and what we see is the public and the regulators are very far ahead in where they see the needs for change in the mining industry. And we are working to address those needs for change. Decarbonization in an era which has a growing demand for metals and a need to be more environmentally and socially responsible. But it is a world where there are continuing demands for metals of all kind. And in this, finding a way to be more environmentally responsible. Sorry, it's not changing. Sorry. So really what we're doing is combining two proven technologies. One of our founding companies has worked with EnviroLeach, and we successfully applied their formula on sulfide concentrates, which we'll explain in a moment. And in situ recovery, highly successful in the uranium industry. Over 50% of all the mines, uranium mines in the world use this technology. Wyoming, as Brian mentioned, is proven for both regulations and extraction. And we have found examples in the world where in situ recovery technology has been used in the gold space. It has not been combined with an environmentally friendly formula, as in our case. And the examples that we've seen are from other countries and using more toxic chemicals. So it is proven. We're trying to do it the right way. I'm going to ask Dennis to, Dr. Stover, to come in and explain a bit more about in situ recovery. Dr. Stover, are you there?
You know, in situ recovery, particularly in North America and in the United States in particular, really is a process that began in the mid-1960s really with the advent of the nuclear power age, as utilities began to look for new and expanded sources of uranium. And they found that in areas, particularly in South Texas, there were known and attractive resources that were not amenable to conventional mining. Either they were too deep for open pit mining, or the rock mechanics were not sufficient to support underground mining. And so a number of companies began to do some extensive testing to develop alternate methods. And in particular, there was a large number of the major oil and gas companies that found that they had uranium on their properties with their oil, gas, and other mineral leases, which are typical in Texas, and brought their reservoir engineering groups to bear on the problem. And over time, we developed very environmentally sound chemistries. Basically in Texas and in Wyoming, the uranium is leached with a mixture of baking soda and either hydrogen peroxide or dissolved oxygen gas. So it's a very benign solution, works extremely well. The treatment is based on installing a series of wells, as you see here in this diagram, typically on what's called a 5-spot pattern, which is a square with injection wells, typically on the corners, production wells in the center. And the fluid is recirculated over and over again, and sent to a, what's basically, as Janet mentioned, a water treatment plant, where the uranium is stripped selectively from the leaching fluid. The fluid is refortified with the baking soda and either hydrogen peroxide and dissolved oxygen, and re-injected and used over and over again. Consumptive use of water in situ recovery operations is very minimal as compared to conventional mining. Likewise, you don't have the dust problems, you have no mill tailing waste to dispose, and likewise you have no mine waste. no solid mine waste. So there's both economic and environmental advantages to the use of ISR. What it has done for uranium is it has made commercially viable a number of modestly or relatively low-grade deposits that may or may not have been economic by conventional mining, but are more than they're extremely economic by using ISR, and actually allows the extraction of uranium in a number of these lower quality projects in Texas and Wyoming, and to be economically competitive with some of the very high grade deposits in Canada and elsewhere in the world. So that in a nutshell is what ISR has been and how it developed. It developed over a period of time, I would say, though the efforts began in the mid-1960s, it was the and late 1970s before it was demonstrated on a large-scale commercial basis. And then in the 1980s, the uranium market had a major setback. Prices were diminished as large deposits were identified elsewhere in the world. And it was at that time that the real advantages of ISR emerged as the economics became intuitively obvious, that you could produce modest quality deposits very economically using ISR and compete very well with high grade deposits around the world. So I turn it back to Janet here.
Thanks, Dennis. The real game changer in all of this is taking a proven technology with in situ recovery, and it's the EnviroLeach formula. Having an environmentally friendly water-based chemistry that we can combine with ISR is really going to be the secret to the success here. And utilizing this on a test project such as Rattlesnake is a fabulous opportunity. And we can really show that this technology does work because we tested it ourselves in our secondary recovery unit that we built in order to replace the smelter process at a project that one of our partner companies operated. And as you can see, the recovery rates are extremely high. Worked better than cyanide, safe for the workplace, lower operating costs. And we want to take this technology and apply it at Rattlesnake. There's a variety of different mineralized settings which make Rattlesnake the ideal test project, and a great team and an amazing opportunity. Just going to try and move it along quickly now in order to get to some questions, but we'll be moving into a test process. And one thing that I want to say that I've learned from Dr. Stover is, and that we've learned on our secondary recovery unit, this isn't a linear process. There's tweaking along the way. There's so many different mineralized settings. So having the ability to test the core, get some fresh core, and apply the different tests required both at the EnviroLeach lab and through column testing in order to determine amenability is incredibly important. And this is where a project like Rattlesnake, which was identified by the Group 11 team as the perfect project for this, becomes so important. So with that, I'm going to move quickly and allow Dasha as the moderator to take over and ask some questions.
Great, thank you so much for taking us through the presentation. Just to kick off the Q&A, Janet, why Rattlesnake?
Brian has already alluded to really the basis that makes Rattlesnake Hills so extremely attractive. First of all, it's in a extremely attractive environmental or governmental setting in Wyoming. The state of Wyoming has extensive experience in licensing, regulating, monitoring the performance of ISR uranium projects. They have a body of regulations already in place that will facilitate a very amenable licensing process there. And more importantly, or even equally important, if not more importantly, as Brian pointed out, there's a number of geochemical, geologic settings here. The project has been drilled extensively. So there's a number of different, it's an ideal test area and development area. The mineralization there will allow us to identify the particular methods or chemistries that will work best for each of the different types of gold mineralogy. And as Janet alluded to, it's always a case of needing to fine-tune the chemistry. There's no question that's been demonstrated with the secondary recovery unit that environmental leaches technology, their chemistry works, and it works very well. It may be a matter of fine-tuning the concentrations, the amount that's used, slightly to enhance and optimize recoveries. But it's just a perfect situation for what we're trying to do here.
Great, thank you. We actually have a question for you, Dr. Stover. At this stage, how would you compare the likelihood of success for gold compared to the same stage when you pioneered uranium?
Well, with the gold situation, like uranium was, as I said, in the 1960s and early 1970s, it's a very embryonic stage at this point. But again, building on the experience that the industry garnered in developing uranium, we have a roadmap now of the way to go about it, and I think it's very comparable to the situation, say in the early 1970s, when there was a lot of testing being developed and a lot of laboratory work being done, and from that came the field pilot tests, and in very short order, in a matter of a few years, we had commercial projects being developed. But you have to walk before you run, and I think we're in a position we know how to walk.
Great, thank you. Damien's asking, when will the first commercial test at Rattlesnake begin? Are there any milestones that need to be reached before this commercial attempt begins?
I'll take that one. The first step is taking some existing core from different mineralized settings to the EnviroLeach lab and running through the tests there. From there, we'll look at column leach and bottle roll tests, and then we'll look at doing some additional fresh core. We get some PQ core. There's a series of tests that would be required to go through for the in situ recovery. And again, drawing on Dr. Stover's experience. And one thing I do want to add further to his comments were the oil and gas industry played a major role in providing so much expertise that we're able to draw on. And really their understanding of well technology is documented now that we're able to draw on, if I got that right.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Janet. We have another question for you, Dr. Stover. Would it be possible for governments to consider outlawing the use of cyanide in mining for mineral? Ira is asking.
That would be a purely speculative response on my part. I have no real sense of what governments may or may not do.
I just wanted to add that this has happened in a couple of places. Romania is an example. Montana has restricted it. And I think it's important that the mining industry look at options. And the future of the mining industry means taking on new technologies and not just doing the tried and true. It was mercury 100 years ago, and then it was cyanide, and heap leach was only 50 years old. So, the mining industry has to, for its own survival, consider a variety of new technologies.
Thank you. Dana's asking, when would the likely time you can reveal the results of broken core test on leaching? And he is curious how you determine the gold recovery, as it will be very small per core.
Well, the initial test will be focused on whole cores, and then in particular, initially we will be testing existing core material, looking, as I said, at whole cores, but also at some broken core samples too, to get just a general sense of how the material reacts to the lixiviant chemistry. How the gold is analyzed, I'll have to defer that question to others.
And we did this before, and I'm going to let Dwayne speak. We did this before with the secondary recovery unit. When we were looking at testing, we had some independent metallurgical tests done on the material. EnviroLeach did some testing. We sent a small, just a few tons in a bulk sample to them. And then, so we're able to go through a series of stages. So it's hard to give a defined date because we do go through a series. But Dwayne, did you want to add anything from EnviroLeach?
Yeah, we've done this before. There's another large company that was looking at the potential of in situ leaching. And so what we've done is we took a series of whole cores and split cores and essentially just put them in a bucket with the solution and recirculated the solution around the core. There was no pressure, there was no temperature, there was no heat or anything else. And you can split the core and then run independent assays on it before and after. And typically where you can determine the recovery is to put it in solution, measure the amount of gold in solution, and then digest anything else that's left over in aqua regia to determine the tailings content of that. And from that, you can wind up with a very accurate representation of what the initial grade was and what the recovery into solution was.
Great, thank you so much. The next question, what tests will be performed and what is the expectation for process based on the experience of introducing ISR to uranium?
Well, I could just, when I talked to Hanif about this, he'd be here today, but he's gone on his first holiday for a long time. So typically, we've done some preliminary, I don't want to call them leach tests, but they're column tests where you're just submerging the material in the solution and then taking samples periodically. We do the same thing with ground materials, whereby you would sample the material every hour to determine what the overall recovery rates are and where it starts to stall or when it becomes no longer efficient. So it's going to be a matter of multiple tests over a specified duration to determine what the recovery levels are of ground material, whole material, fractured material.
Thank you. Our next question is from Dana. He's asking, it would seem that this can be bootstrapped, that if you mine 10% of the ore, that might finance all of the remaining drilling. He's asking, is that possible?
I think it's early to speculate on that. I think it's one thing that we found at the secondary recovery unit was, I think we went through, I think about 15 to 17 test periods. And so you finesse it and you improve it over time. But I think Dennis maybe should answer how it implemented in uranium, because I believe it started with smaller companies. I'm not sure bootstrap was the term, but Dennis?
He's asking, how long will the test phase run for before results will be made to the public?
That's really difficult to project at this point because we're just now in the earliest stages of beginning the testing. And as the results come in, it will dictate when we can move to the next stage, whether we need to do more expanded laboratory work or whether we have sufficient confidence that we can begin moving towards a small field test. But it's premature to make that kind of forecast at this point.
Yeah, I think what's important, Dash, is that we realize that this fall we'll be implementing the testing at the labs, and then we would proceed to look at fresh core, and then if you get into field testing, there's a permitting process to go through. Now, Wyoming is a permissible environment, and it's not full-blown production, so it's testing. So it's a very clear process, but I think we've got to get the results out first, and I think that's the question that I'm hearing is when we do the initial testing at EnviroLeach, we will publish those results this fall.
And I just wanted to look into that. With the initial test that we did on split core for the other company, was within 3 weeks we had actually received or we reported about 50% recovery in the first 3 weeks in a non-pressurized, non-heated environment with very low levels of reagent in the solution. And so I think that, once we've got some core in the lab, once we've got some ground material in the lab, I think that we can probably turn around results within 3 weeks.
The other thing that's important is that the recovery continues over a period of time. And this is what we learned at the SRU, was that the testing shows how long the recovery period is. And the other important thing that I'd like to plug about the EnviroLeach formula, it's 100% recyclable. So when we did all of our testing, it was all with the same material. So that huge factor, that is a huge plus and a great breakthrough that EnviroLeach has made.
Great, thank you. Lawrence has a question. What is the addressable market size? What is the business model of G11 going forward?
Group 11 is a private U.S. company and will remain a private U.S. company until we build up the research and development on the technology and the combination of these two proven technologies, and we create value. So it's really looking at more of a high-tech model than a mining model. We're not going in because we want to go drill and finance. We're going in to the public markets because we've proven up a technology. So you can expect that this would not happen until we have spent adequate time proving up that this is going to be workable on both an environmental and an economic basis. So until that time, and we expect that to take a few years, until that time, it will be privately held. We just did a financing for $1 million in EnviroLeach, Group Encore Energy, and Golden Predator are all shareholders in the public market, and then a series of private qualified accredited investors.
I'd like to address the potential for the market is it's an incredible opportunity, because typically the reason there's a lot of gold deposits in the world, thousands of them, that are either too small or are in environmentally sensitive areas that preclude their mining. If you've got some place that has 50,000 ounces of gold, you're not going to spend $400 million building a plant and all the infrastructure and all of the multi-millions of dollars it takes to access that ore body. This changes the landscape entirely. This unlocks the value of literally thousands of gold deposits around the world.
And I think that's what was how uranium started. It was, and Mark Paliza, one of our advisors, refers to it as when in situ recovery started the uranium sector, they called them baby miners because it was on all the small mines. But once the small mines started to show very good economics and operating in an environmentally responsible manner, the bigger companies started to come in. Am I not correct, Dennis?
Yeah, it was a combination of both. Some of the early projects were, in fact, sponsored and underwritten by the large oil and gas companies. And then a number of small companies came into existence, as Mark referred to, and as I've had experience with also, which were really small private companies that were staffed by people that had experience with the larger companies and moved over to take advantage of the entrepreneurial opportunities. So you had both going on.
Excellent. But yes, I think Dwayne's correct on the opportunities that exist. And again, having a project like Rattlesnake that we've identified as the best test project that we could find, excellent jurisdiction, amazing variety of mineralization, really gives us that advantage to illustrate how the technology works.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go to the next question because we have lots of questions here and we're running out of time. So our next question is from Dana. He says, in some tests, sulfide ores did not do well and plenty of oxide ore to go after at Rattlesnake. However, in our last summit, your last summit was 6, the EnviroLeach CEO said that they were getting now getting results on sulfide ores. His question is, what is the current ability for sulfide ore?
Okay, I can address that. Our formula doesn't care whether it's sulfides or oxides. We got the same recovery on oxidized ores as we did sulfide ores. The work that we did for Golden Predator and Janet was all sulfide ores, and the initial tests on site averaged 93% recovery without any optimization of the formula. I think we poured close to 500 ounces of gold there from a few tons. We also did extensive testing for another large British Columbia gold mine, and that was 4 tons of sulfide, high sulfide materials, and again, over 96% recovery in less than 5 hours on that. I think we poured almost 500 ounces of gold from 2.5 tons of material from there as well. So as long as it's free milling gold, that is, it's not locked up in the matrix of the underlying materials, our formula will digest it.
Great, thank you. Terry's asking, how do you know that you've captured all of the gold on that site?
On the Rattlesnake site?
Yeah.
Well, what's important to keep in mind is with in situ recovery, it works because the chemistry touches the ore or the mineral. So, I don't think you're planning on getting everything, but what you're going to get is economical, and you're going to do it in a way that's environmentally responsible. We're mining without moving a rock, so I'm not envisioning you're getting everything, but you're going to get the majority of it. Am I correct, Dennis?
Yes, absolutely, all the way around. Yeah. The key is the ability to bring the leaching solution in contact with the mineral, in this case, gold. And if that mineral is encapsulated within another mineral that does not dissolve, then sure, you're not going to get it. But the presumption here is that most of the mineral, most of the gold is going to be accessible, as is the case with uranium also. But again, it's recoverable. It's recovery of the accessible mineral. So, and it's just a reality in any mining process. There's a certain amount of material that's not recoverable.
Yeah. And important to realize is what we are not going to replace conventional mining. We are going to offer an option that's going to work on certain types of deposits and certain types of settings. And it's going to be similar to what heap leach did, where it provides an option for people. We are doing it with a very strong environmental focus.
Great.
Yes, and it's really easy to tell when you've reached saturation, or you've eliminated or pardon me, digested the gold, because you'll see it in the daily assay tests of the fluids that are being pumped back to the surface. And there's just one more thing, Janet, is that we haven't, I don't think we've talked about this morning, is that there is a lot of existing gold mines that have fractured or that's underneath the current workings, that they could also use this technology to drill into those structures in existing gold mines that may be too small to justify moving heavy equipment underground and blasting into those deposits. So this is something that can actually really complement existing gold miners as well. Yeah,
good point, Dwayne. And the thing that I would summarize by saying that it's the team that's extremely important. It takes, as Dr. Stover said, when in situ recovery was developed in the uranium sector, it took a variety of skill sets, and having the historical knowledge of this capacity on the team, combining it with this breakthrough technology from EnviroLeach, incredibly important in providing this option for people.
Great. Thank you. Nick is asking, what is the impact of rock properties on forecasting and reconciliation?
Sorry, I lost Dasha's connection. Could you repeat that, Dasha? Sorry.
Yeah, Nick is asking, what is the impact of rock properties on forecasting and reconciliation?
That one's stump the man.
What I'm referring to is the permeability of the ore underground,
Right.
And how that's going to affect the overall digestion and recoverability and reconciliation of leftover materials. So, and again, that's going to be really ore dependent, rock dependent, and other ways that we can unnaturally fracture that ore underground to help with that permeability or accessibility to the gold particles themselves.
Thank you. Kevin is wondering, what are some of the biggest obstacles for a positive outcome?
I think that there's a great opportunity here to look at how to apply the EnviroLeach formula to in situ recovery, and important is the first step in amenability from the ore. It's a proven technology. It's economically and environmentally responsible. So, I think that there's huge opportunities that we can test across the property.
There's a couple of, the only hurdles that I'm concerned about. We know that the lixiviant will dissolve all free gold, whether it's sitting in a bucket and there's material in it, as long as I said, as long as our lixiviant or the reagents can actually touch the gold, we will dissolve it. The size of gold particles will determine how long it takes to dissolve it. But as you've seen with all of the previous news releases from us, our ability to digest gold is typically faster than cyanide. More importantly, there's such a broad applicability spectrum. With cyanide, you cannot inject it into anything with deleterious materials. If there's 1% copper, you're not going to use cyanide because the cyanide will be consumed by that copper. We've run our lixiviant in 35% copper. So those are sort of the obstacles. But I think the biggest obstacle I'd be concerned about would be the injection of the solution into the ore body and not losing that solution. So either it has to be encapsulated, and there's all types of ways that you can inject mortar around a deposit to prevent that from happening. But as long as we can inject the fluid into the ore body, it touches the gold, and then pump it back to surface, I'm 100% confident in our ability to get good recoveries on that gold.
There's a really good video on the Group 11 website that I recommend people watch on how in situ recovery works and how the perimeter is established with a series of test wells, ensuring that the lixiviant does not leave the area. And also important to know is in the history of in situ recovery mining in the U.S., there has not been one example, one incident of contamination of groundwater. It is also uses the least amount of groundwater of all extraction technologies. So there's many great advantages of this. The one is it's not going to work on every type of deposit, as Dr. Stover said. So it's going to provide an option.
Yeah,
Great, thank
you
so
thing
much.
I would add environmentally is because you're installing a series of wells rather than excavating to access the ore. Once any surface disturbance is temporary. The wells are installed, they're operated. Once the gold mining is completed, the wells are plugged and cut off below surface, and the surface is amenable again, available again for all the pre-mining uses, whether it be agriculture, raising cattle, running cattle, farming, or commercial development. The land is returned to its original conditions, and there's never been any residual long-term soil contamination. The little bit that has occurred with uranium was minor and was picked up and reclaimed within a year or two. So it's like the groundwater situation. The sites are restored to the same use category that they existed before the mining began. Huge environmental advantage.
I just want to say, Dasha, that I think there's been amazing questions, and this is just really showing the interest people have in looking at new technology in the mining space. And I'm very excited, even though some of them are very hard questions. I've been really excited by the questions that we've heard today.
Yeah, and there's lots more questions that we won't unfortunately get to in the last few minutes. I think we have time for one more question, but we will make sure all your questions are answered afterwards by email. But Ken is asking, are GFG shareholders carried to commercialization? If the project goes ahead, at what point is GFG required to input capital, if at all? And once in production, does GFG earn 30% of the gold produced?
Yeah, I guess I can answer that, Dasha. Stage 3 and 4 of the agreement really dictate the commercial build and operating phases of the infrastructure. So GFG would be carried through to the 70-30 joint venture formation, and that would occur on commercial production. So essentially what has to go on is the capital to build the mine has to be provided, and at which point it reaches that commercial production, a joint venture is formed. G11 funds to that point. There is a payback component to it inherent to the agreement, wherein GFG would pay back G11 50% of our share of the capital from 50% of the cash flow of the mine. So that allows G11 to recoup a portion of the invested capital that they put in on behalf of GFG. So I think that answers the question in terms of capital allocation. There's no capital risk to fund this from GFG's perspective, and a success of building the mine would result in a 70-30 ownership on commercial production.
Great. Thank you so much. So we are running out of time, and I just want to thank everyone so much for joining us today and asking all these great questions. Like I said, if we didn't get a chance to ask and get your question answered during this live event, we will make sure that all the presenters are able to answer them by email. And also, if you want to reach out to any of the companies, the contact information is here on the slide. And as always, this summit is recorded, so it will be up on 6.com. I know there were a lot of questions about that very soon. I will just pass it back to Brian or Janet for the final word before we close out.
Go ahead, Janet, and I'll say a bit after you.
I just want to thank everybody for their time today. Time is valuable, and appreciate that you've given so much interest in what we're doing. We look forward to reporting our results and letting you know how things are working out, and the future is here.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dasha and Six team, for putting on a webinar. I know there were some technical difficulties through there, but it is available online, and we thank to all the listeners as well. It's been a great presentation.